As I shoot exclusively with film, I print in a traditional wet darkroom onto light-sensitive photographic paper. Like film, these prints consist of tiny particles of real black metallic silver suspended in a gelatine emulsion, and they have a depth that ink on paper prints don't have. This is a print map, a light print to show all the tones available on this negative, and these are my markings as to how I want to interpret that in the final print. Now these markings are to show that I want to darken the sky progressively down, but allow some light radiating up from these illuminated hothouses. And I'll be darkening down the foreground, and I'll be lightening this spillage of light onto the grass by running something here to hold the light back during the exposure so it's lighter, which will then want to darken quite a lot on a low contrast grade. That'll be a yellow light, these two areas to burn in some tone so that when I tone it, this picks up a little bit of yellow from the toner, and then this very hot spot where there's a bright light will have an additional exposure to bring up the tone in here which is burnt out. The selection and the preparation of the negative to remove all the dust and static charge is worth spending a little extra time on at this stage. It can save hours of retouching later on the finished print. The enlarger projects the negative image onto an easel where it is composed and focused, ready for printing. I often use a meter here to measure the light levels and the range of tones in the negative. This way I can work out the exposure and the contrast I want to use for my final interpretation in the print. Being light sensitive, this photographic paper must be handled either in darkness or in so-called safe light that the paper can't see. This is usually red or brown and depends on the paper being used. During exposure onto the paper, I use yellow and magenta filters in different ratios to control the contrast around the print. The paper emulsion sees the yellow as low contrast and the magenta as high contrast. Then, using cards, my hands, or little dodgers on wire, I hold back the light to areas I want to print lighter or at a different contrast, and I add more light where I want the tones to be darker. Flashing the paper with a carefully measured tiny amount of white light can sensitize it to light without itself recording a tone. And this can be a really useful trick when printing in dense highlights like the bright lights inside these hothouses. The paper now goes into the developer, and this is that magic moment that anybody who has been in a darkroom always remembers, when the invisible latent image slowly reveals itself as the developer turns the invisible silver salts into grains of black metallic silver. When complete, the developer is neutralized in a stop bath and then transferred to the fixer. The job of this fixing bath is to remove all the unused but still light sensitive silver salts and make the print light safe. From this point on, everything can be safely done in normal room light. This is the first chance to properly inspect the print for flaws, exposure, contrast and compositional balance, which is often best done with the print upside down. Although it will have been based on previous test prints, the print always looks lighter when wet, so if it looks just right here, it will dry down too dark. Before toning the prints, I often use a ferricyanide or iodine silver bleach to lighten smaller local areas. Sometimes known as liquid sunshine, this bleach allows finer detailed lighting than is possible by dodging areas during the exposure. This does require some considerable practice, as it can easily ruin a print. In this image, I like the slightly unreal feeling of this brilliantly lit structure, almost as if it's just landed behind these trees, and I want to emphasize the light spilling out of it onto the grass. These bleached areas must then be refixed. I'm using two chemical toning stages in this series of prints. These act directly on the silver and they change its density and its colour. They also greatly increase its archival permanence. I am using them here to make the shadow tones deeper and colder in colour and the highlights a little brighter and warmer. This adds both colour contrast and depth to the image. After a pre-toning bath, the first toner is selenium, which stains everything except the print. It converts the silver into a dense, highly stable silver selenide compound. It starts working first in the darkest tones, and so I control the time and temperature carefully to restrict its progress. The print now needs to be washed for 1 hour before the next stage. The second toner is a sepia. This acts on the lightest tones first and progresses downwards. It has 2 stages, a yellow bleach stage and then the toning stage, which changes the black silver to a brown silver compound. The exact colour of this brown depends on the ratios of the chemicals mixed up. Because the bleach always acts more than the eye can see, I always time this carefully at a controlled temperature and dilution to precisely limit how far the colour extends. This ferricyanide so-called bleach is really a chemical reducer, changing the silver to nearly colourless silver ferrocyanide, and it must be washed off thoroughly before the next toning bath. This sepia toner changes that ferrocyanide to a silver sulfur compound, just in these bleached light tones. I formulate this for a delicate yellow-brown, which is incredibly stable and will last for hundreds of years. The print must now be washed again for an hour. As I only use slow-drying fibre-based papers, I prefer to hang these to dry slowly overnight without touching the surface, which can be a bit soft and delicate after the chemical treatment. Fibre prints always curl after air drying and need to be flattened before retouching and mounting. I use these heat presses hot for 2 minutes to flatten the prints, and if possible I then leave the cold prints under pressure for a day or two to retain that flatness permanently. Despite the best efforts, there are usually some enlarged dust spots visible on the prints, and these must be spotted out manually with archival dyes blended to match the print colours. This is another skill that needs quite a lot of practice. With the spotting completed, the print is mounted, ready for display. All the images in the book that accompanies this exhibition were scanned directly from the darkroom prints. 2 editions of this book and limited editions of the silver prints are available directly from the following website.